He didn't try to prove anything. And today, it's impossible to ignore who he's become. But what about you? How many times have you tried to be seen? How many times have you swallowed your tears, lowered your eyes, chosen silence, just to avoid having to explain your own pain? Maybe you didn't scream, didn't seek revenge, didn't expose anyone. Maybe you just stayed, even when everyone else left. Stay here with me. Maybe something along the way will touch you in an unexpected way. Some people succeed in noise. Others succeed in absence. They succeed in the silence of empty hallways, in the late nights when no one is watching, in the moments when it seems like nothing is happening. But inside, everything is changing. This video is about that kind of person. The kind almost no one notices, but who carries a strength capable of breaking patterns, reclaiming truths, and creating a new beginning, even after being completely discredited. Have you ever been there? Have you ever had to keep going when everyone else gave up? Have you ever felt like the one who stayed when everyone else left? Maybe no one applauded. Maybe no one noticed. But the truth is, the greatest transformations happen far from the stage. In the dark, invisible. Keanu Reeves knows what this is like, not because he told us, but because, even in silence, his pain was felt. And it's not just about fame, cinema, or interviews. It's about what wasn't said, about what he experienced behind the downcast eyes, the restrained smiles, the absences no one understood. He lost a daughter. He buried the love of his life. He faced tragedies without turning any of it into a spectacle. And yet, or perhaps because of this today, he is seen as a symbol of resilience, of quiet strength, of rare integrity, of someone who stayed and overcame. But this isn't just about him. It's about you too. It's about what you chose to endure when everyone told you to quit. About that phase when you could have given up, but didn't. About the silent decision no one applauded, but which changed everything inside. Here, every story is a spark. Every video is a safe space to remember who you are, even when the world tries to make you forget. Because maybe you're in the middle of that part of life where most people give up, where the voices from outside tell you it's best to stop, that it's not worth continuing. But maybe it's exactly here, at this almost invisible point, that the turning point begins, where the invisible becomes a seed, where resistance becomes rebirth. Stay until the end, because there's something in this silence that still needs to be heard. There's something that happens when we hear a story that seems to have been written with pieces of our own. It's as if, for a few minutes, we stop feeling alone in the world. As if someone, somewhere has put into words what we've never been able to explain. And if this is happening to you right now, if any part of this story touched an old wound or ignited a forgotten spark, write it down below. Really, tell me what's hurting you right now, or what you've experienced that no one else has seen. Because when you comment, you're not just sharing your experience, you're also helping others recognize themselves. Sometimes someone reads what you wrote and realizes they're not the only one going through this. Sometimes your truth is exactly what someone needed to keep going. And if you feel like you want to be a part of this network of silent stories that, even without a stage, are changing lives like this video. It's simple, but it makes a difference. YouTube understands that this content matters, and it shows it to more people who also need to hear it. And if you want to continue this journey with me, subscribe to the channel here. This is how you show me that it's worth continuing to create this space. That there are people out there feeling the same way I do. Your presence here is not just a number, it is a beacon. Because the truth is that each of us carries something invisible. And maybe, when we share, the invisible begins to truly exist. Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you've been judged, not for what you did, but for what you didn't do? For your lack of response, for your choice not to raise your voice, for continuing even when everything around you screamed at you to stop. It's curious how, in this noisy world, silence has become synonymous with weakness. As if the fact that you don't justify yourself, don't defend yourself, don't constantly try to prove your worth, is an admission of defeat, but it isn't. Sometimes silence is the strongest form of resistance. Sometimes not fighting back is exactly what keeps you together. Because there's a subtle strength in not bowing to the noise, in not conforming to other people's expectations, in not begging to be seen. There's a kind of courage that doesn't need to be applauded. It just needs to be sustained. And this is where something few people talk about comes in: the weight of staying. Of staying when no one else wanted to stay. Of continuing to do the right thing, even when no one appreciates it. This slowly erodes. Because you look around and see people gaining ground with shouting, exaggerations, characters created just to please. Meanwhile, you carry your own name, your own story, your own limits, with dignity. But in silence. And the truth is, the world doesn't know how to handle this. The world distrusts those who don't overexpose themselves. The world disbelieves those who don't need to sell themselves. Because there's a hidden truth that scares many people. Those who don't need to prove anything already know who they are. And this kind of person is dangerous because they can't be bought, they can't be bent, they can't be molded to fit anywhere. Maybe you've felt it in your body. The sensation of walking among others as if you're off script. You're not playing the game. You don't need to win the debate. You have no desire to compete with anyone. All you want is space to live your own journey with integrity. But for some reason, it bothers you. Because your silence says so much more than cheap words. Because your way of existing exposes what many try to hide: the absence of truth. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. Because what many people don't realize is the impact this kind of invisible pain accumulates over time. It's not an open wound that bleeds immediately. It's a silent cut when you learn to hide. But it's there, every day. And every time someone belittles you, every time someone ignores your attempts to do the right thing, every time someone calls you worthless, that cut deepens. Until one day, you start to believe it too. And that's where the danger lies, when the world convinces you it's not worth continuing. When your own mind starts repeating phrases that once came from outside. When the silence that once was strength turns into isolation, and what was integrity turns into doubt. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever felt like you're carrying something precious that no one can see? As if your story were being lived out behind the scenes, while the world applauds characters on stage. Comment here. I'm on that journey too. I want to know who still walks even in silence. Because when we talk about Keanu, we're not just talking about an actor with a trajectory marked by tragedy. We're talking about an archetype that often represents exactly what the modern world has forgotten how to value: strength of spirit, quiet dignity. Strength that doesn't need a stage. While everyone else sought the spotlight, he sought presence. While the world demanded performance, he offered truth. And this choice to remain himself, even when everything seemed to be falling apart, didn't come without a cost. It's easy to admire someone when you only know the result. But what few recognize is the journey to get there. The behind the scenes. What happens when no one's watching? Keanu lost his newborn daughter. Shortly after, he lost the woman he loved. In a tragic accident, he saw close friends pass away. And even in the face of so much loss, so much silence imposed by life, he didn't explode, didn't rebel against the world, didn't try to prove himself right. He just carried on. With that somewhat restrained expression, that look that says it all without needing to say anything. This choice, which seems simple from the outside, is perhaps one of the most difficult to sustain. To continue without becoming bitter. To continue without closing oneself off. To continue being kind even when the world wasn't. This is the true invisible revolution. And perhaps that's why so many people project onto him the idea of resilient strength. Because he became, without ever declaring it, the portrait of someone who transformed pain into awareness. It's not about idolatry. It's not about placing him on an unattainable pedestal. It's about acknowledging a journey that carries something deeply human. His pain is relatable. His silence is familiar. He experienced tragedies that could have destroyed anyone, but he used them as a foundation for something deeper, more serene. This is where we understand that resilience isn't about getting up and pretending nothing happened. It's about getting up differently, more conscious, more whole, even if it still hurts. It's about living with presence, even while carrying absences. It's about continuing with kindness, even when you have 1,000 reasons to toughen up. And perhaps what inspires him most about his journey is this: the way he let pain shape him, without letting it define who he was. It's one thing to suffer. It's quite another to turn pain into a portal for transformation. Because pain, however cruel, carries an invitation. And this invitation isn't printed in bold letters, it whispers. It asks for silence to be heard. The truth is, the greatest mindset shifts don't come from grandiose moments. They emerge in the most intimate moments. The moment you sit up in bed and decide to carry on. The moment you choose not to respond. When you feel anger but don't feed it. When you feel fear but don't back down. When you realize the world can call you whatever it wants, but only you can say who you are. Comment here: I choose to continue. Because only those who have remained silent know the weight and the strength of not giving up. Perhaps, as you listen to all this, you're remembering moments that were very personal to you. Things no one else saw. Words that still hurt when you remember them. And if this content is awakening something deep inside you, even if it's hard to name, right in the comments what touched you most so far. Sometimes putting into words what we felt is a way to reclaim parts of ourselves that have been silent for too long. And by sharing your experience, you also help others who may be going through something similar, but haven't yet been able to voice their pain. If this topic resonates with you, like the video. Not only to show me you're there, but because each like helps this content reach those who also need to hear this message right now. And if you feel like continuing to walk with me through these deeper conversations, subscribe to the channel. It's your presence here that makes this space possible, a place for those who are tired of noise and seek truth. Here, every story has value, every journey matters, and every comment is another flame lit in the darkness. Because no matter how silent the pain, when it's shared with empathy, it begins to transform. Now, let's continue. Because there's still more for us to play. That invisible, seemingly small decision you made silently was one of the most revolutionary of your life. There was no announcement. There were no witnesses. There was no applause. It was just you, to yourself, saying softly, perhaps even with a lump in your throat, I don't need to prove anything anymore. And that moment, though no one saw it, was a turning point. A break with what was expected of you. A transition of identity, subtle on the outside, immense on the inside. It's curious how this kind of choice almost never receives the recognition it deserves. Because the world is accustomed to seeing major transformations as explosions, visible dramatic changes, with background music and people clapping. But the hidden truth is that the most definitive changes happen in silence. The decision to stop arguing, to stop trying to fit in, to stop sabotaging yourself just to please, to keep moving forward, even if no one understands what you're doing. In that moment, a new mindset emerges. You realize you don't need to convince anyone of who you are, that it's not your responsibility to support others' projections, that your journey doesn't need validation to be legitimate. This changes everything. Not because the world suddenly changes, but because you begin to see things from a different perspective. With more clarity, with more truth, with more you. And it's precisely because it's silent that this shift is so powerful. Because it breaks a pattern. The pattern of seeking permission, of asking for approval, of carrying the guilt of being different. From this decision on, you stop living for the eyes of the outside world and finally begin to be guided by what you feel inside. There's no more beautiful script than this, but no one tells you how lonely this turning point can be. How strange it is, at first, to walk without the shackles that have always been part of the landscape. How uncomfortable it is to no longer explain yourself, to no longer justify yourself, to no longer chase after explanations that defend you. It feels like abandonment, but it's rebirth. It feels like emptying, but it's cleansing. It's the beginning of a new space, yours alone. And as much as it hurts some days, because yes, it still does, you feel like there's no going back. Because even if the path ahead is uncertain, you no longer fit into the old versions of yourself. The place of doubt became a bridge. Silence became choice. Pain became raw material. This silent shift reconnects you with something that may have lain dormant for too long, the right to be whole. To not carry other people's expectations on your shoulders. To simply exist, without frames, without explanations, without needing to fit in. There is freedom there. There is dignity there. And most importantly, there is truth. And when you find that truth, not the absolute truth, but your own, you realize it was always waiting for you to acknowledge it. Not out loud, but in action, in attitude, in presence. And it's from this presence that the world, little by little, begins to see you differently. Not because you shouted ... but because you stayed. Comment. Here, my turn was silent. Because this decision changes everything, even if no one sees it. Because perhaps you're remembering, right now, all the times you did the right thing and no one noticed. Or worse, they turned their backs on you as if your choice had been a sign of weakness. How many times have you tried to maintain your integrity and been told you were being foolish, too sensitive, too slow, too idealistic? How many times has choosing what was right meant being alone? It's strange to realize that, in many environments, doing the right thing comes at a high cost, because it undermines the comfort of those who prefer what's easy, what's quick, and what's dirty. But even so, you stayed. Even so, you continued to believe in your essence. And that says more about your strength than any medal. There's a silent impact on those who insist on keeping their hearts clean in a world that insists on dirtying everything. And you, perhaps without realizing it, have done this more often than you realize. Because there's something incredibly powerful in not letting pain transform you into what hurt you. In consciously choosing to move forward when the weight of experience pushes you to harden. The world forgets the value of firm kindness. It thinks those who don't scream, who don't confront, who don't assert themselves through shouting ... are weak. But keeping a clean heart amidst chaos requires a strength few possess. Responding with compassion when everything around screams for revenge is one of the purest forms of resistance. Keanu demonstrated this clearly. He didn't need to turn his pain into a spectacle. He didn't need to justify himself, defend himself, or respond in kind. He remained himself discreet, ethical, serene. And that's precisely what touched millions. Because when someone remains whole despite the cuts, it creates an impact. It generates truth. It inspires transformation. And ultimately, no one sees the behind the scenes of your journey. They'll see what you've accomplished. They'll admire your strength, maybe even praise your poise. But they won't imagine how many times you almost couldn't get out of bed. How many times you held back tears in the middle of a conversation. How many times you had to silence your own urgency to maintain peace. And when that recognition begins to dawn, because yes, it will, the world may try to attribute the credit to circumstances, luck, the appearance of control. But only you will know what truly brought you here. Only you know the hidden truth behind your most difficult decisions. The ones no one saw. The ones that rebuilt you from within. You've become your own role model. And maybe you haven't even realized it yet. But the fact that you're here, still moving, even after everything you've been through, that says so much more than any speech. Comment here. I'm rebuilding myself from the inside. Because this is a silent but meaningful journey. And it still continues. If you've made it this far, perhaps you felt this conversation spoke to parts of you that had been silent for a long time. And if at any point in the video you saw yourself, recognized yourself, felt less alone, then this exchange was worthwhile. Like this video, if it resonated with you, it's a simple yet powerful way to show that this message needs to continue resonating. If you want to stay with me longer, subscribe to the channel here. I'm creating this space for us to talk about things that almost no one talks about, but everyone feels. And comment below, I'm with you until the end. Just so I know you stayed silent, but present. There's a video here that complements this topic. Click and continue with me there. We still have a lot to transform, calmly, truthfully, and courageously.